What are some of the more unique weapon mechanics in Terraria you wished more weapons had? For me, I wish more guns had the traits of the current revolver. Now, anyone that has used this weapon since its rework knows that it might cause carpal tunnel. Okay, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but the rework did make this gun way more click intensive if you're trying to use it optimally. Before, the revolver was basically just the Undertaker, but very slightly better. But now you get rewarded for timing your shots. Instead of just holding down the trigger, you now get more crit chance and attack speed only if you keep up a rhythm of well-timed shots. And by well-timed shots, the game pretty much means firing as the revolver comes off cooldown. And as you keep up the timing, your attack speed gets faster, the cooldown feels like it gets shorter, and it actually gets a bit challenging to continue the perfect timing for a longer period. Now keep in mind, auto-fire will not work. You have to manually time the shots to get the bonuses, and I'm not really sure if an auto-clicker would work for this either, but I was surprised how many of you seem to think so based on the comments on my short. You roughly reach twice the DPS by timing the shots, maybe more if you're cracked enough to maintain the perfect timing for longer. The damage isn't absurd in the grand scheme of things, but what I really like is the satisfaction of seeing all the crits pile up when you get a long chain going. You do lose some momentum if you mistime a few shots, but overall, they made the revolver a lot more interesting with a rework that is honestly fairly simple. And I really wish there was at least one other gun that had this trait, like the Venus Magnum. It doesn't really have that much going for it right now. Some other weapons that also reward you for timing in a different sense are these. Now offensively, they don't have too much going on. The brand is just a giant broadsword that ignites enemies, and the shield is basically a boomerang with really strong homing. But the real upside to these weapons are their defensive mechanics, because they both let you raise almost any equipped shield to defend yourself at the cost of movement speed. But this shield mechanic goes even deeper, because instead of holding mouse 2 to defend, you can tap it instead and do this. Yup, you get to perform a parry. And not only that, the parry will completely negate contact damage and deals that damage back twice full to the attacking enemy. Now getting the timing down for the parry isn't the hardest thing in the world, but it's definitely harder for Terraria standards, as most things in the game aren't asking for such precision, since you only have up to 1/3 of a second to react in order to parry attacks. But wait, there's more, because upon every successful parry, you also gain the strike and moment buff, which lets your next melee attack do an absurd amount of damage. There are a few important things to note about the parry, such as only being able to parry contact damage, so it cannot save you from traps or negate projectiles. Except for this one, for some reason. Also, the revenge damage caps at 1000, so you unfortunately can't make Daytime Empress taste her own medicine, but some enemies will still pay for their sins, like the tortoise and its off-screen spinning attack. Overall, I really like these weapons mainly for their ability to parry. It's somewhat challenging to use, but rewarding when you do pull it off. I also like the uniqueness of the parry because there aren't a lot of weapons that actively let you use them in a defensive way. And I think it would be cool to see this mechanic worked into more melee weapons because it's a fun option that still leans into the close range playstyle of melee that some players might still enjoy. Now the next weapons I want to talk about don't have much to do with skill expression like the previous ones, but I really like their unique traits and mechanics because they solve one of the hugest issues I personally have with Summoner. And those weapons are the Fox Parks, and to a lesser extent, the Kativa. You see, these are minions from the palworld collab, and one thing that separates them from pretty much every other minion is the way you're able to interact with them. With the Kativa, aside from functioning like a regular summoned minion would, it also helps you cut down trees and mine. While the Fox Parks doesn't help you with tasks, it does let you pick it up and use it like a flamethrower. These are very simple interactions, but it's what I always felt like Summoner was missing. Like, you have all these other minions, but how do you really interact with them? Well, you summon them, and they attack on their own. And that's it. You can right click to make them focus targets, and they can also trigger some whip effects by attacking, but that's pretty much as far as interaction goes. Now of course, some minions have their differences, like some can fly or even shoot projectiles, but they all still have this basic functionality and behavior. So having minions that break this mold by allowing you to directly interact with them, and them being able to directly interact with the environment really makes them stand out and feel unique. But as I said earlier, minions are only one of the hugest issues I have with Summoner. The other issue is that you only have whips as your other main weapon. And similar to the minions, there are many whips with plenty of cool effects, but the effects don't drastically change how you go about using them, which is just by standing there, whipping. Now I'm not sure what can be done about whips outside of having different weapon types that can also apply tag damage, but I can at least say I'm very happy with the palworld minions and what they bring to Summoner, because they feel like actual summons that have some utility rather than just passive damage sources that follow you around. I hope we can get more additions to Summoner that lean into you, the player, being able to interact with your tools more. Kinda like with the upcoming movable sentry change that they've teased. Overall, I really enjoy these weapons and their unique traits and mechanics because they change up the gameplay loop. The revolver spits out crits if you can master well-timed shots. You get to execute a cool parry if you have the right timing. And the palworld minions introduced the interactive aspect I always felt minions in Terraria were missing. I hope we can eventually get more weapons like these with traits that actively give you more interesting things to do. But let me know in the comments, what are some weapons with mechanics that you really enjoy using?